Hello, and welcome to this video tutorial on how to have the best logo for your personal brand, your portrait. I'm Tracy Dargeny, and on this brief video, I'm going to walk you through the steps to take to ensure that your online portrait reflects your professional best. When creating your personal brand, your portrait, especially on LinkedIn, is your logo. If you use an old school portrait, the kind with an outdated backdrop or school photo style, you're likely repelling business opportunities. Instead, show the world that you have a contemporary mindset. For those of us over 40, this isn't about looking younger, it's about demonstrating that you get today's business practices. Make no mistake, your portrait is not a nice to have. According to LinkedIn, your profile is 14 times more likely to be viewed if you have a photo. Not just twice as likely, 14 times as likely. But that doesn't mean you should use just any photo on your LinkedIn profile. What is your portrait saying about you? It should be saying that you understand how to be successful in a forward-thinking business culture. This is important for any professional, but it's critical to more seasoned pros whose age may make them be perceived as having an outdated mindset. You don't want somebody to mistake you for one of these guys. So let me show you two examples of some actual professionals who have used updated portraits over the years as their careers and trends changed. First, for anyone not familiar with Faye Waddington, she's probably best known for having been the president of Planned Parenthood Federation of America for over a decade, and to this day she continues to be known for her leadership. Though she hasn't aged much over the years, her professional portraits sure show she's changed with the times. And most of you will recognize this fine gentleman, Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft. Again, much like Miss Waddington, he also has changed his wardrobe and portrait style throughout the years. I mean, can you imagine if he was using the same style as one of the older pictures today? As some of these older shots demonstrate, there are a few factors to avoid in your portrait. So if your current portrait has any of these elements, it's time to ditch it. Your portrait should not look like it was taken on school picture day. It should not have a backdrop of a fake library or faux marbling. You should not be posed sitting in a position your body would never naturally choose. And while it's okay to wear a suit for some people, if that's what you normally wear every day to work, for the most part, even CEOs today are not having their portraits taken in suits. So really think that through. And if you do wear a suit, definitely have it be a more modern business style of portrait than this one. And for the love of God, you should not use a glamour shot as your LinkedIn portrait. So, okay, I know right now you're thinking, well, of course, I would never use this kind of photo in my LinkedIn profile. But you may be surprised what kind of portraits people do actually use. So here are 48 examples of some actual LinkedIn portraits of my contacts. I think you'll agree there are some pictures here that are great, but others, however, are not reflecting the best these people have to offer. Now, just to be clear, this is not an entirely subjective practice. People feel very personal about their portraits, which is a natural thing since it's representing yourself and your face, your body image. But there's actually some objectivity to this. If we got a group of recruiters together to go through these 48 pictures one by one, there's a really good chance that there'd be a real strong consensus on which are the top 5 and which are the bottom 5. So while I believe that there are more than 5 or even 8 great examples on this page, I'm just going to focus on what I would consider the best 8. So what do these portraits have in common? Each conveys someone who appears to be approachable, respectable, and confident. Technically, each photo is well lit, well framed, and focused on the face. The backgrounds are white or out of focus. In other words, they're not distracting from the person's face. They are crisp, clean, elegant in their simplicity. As for which of those 48 pictures are the worst, I'll leave that up to you to decide. But I will show you which one of those 48 I think is the absolute worst. And it's, again, not subjective. Remember, we go back to that 14 times more likely to be viewed with a photo. So yes, this one, no portrait. This is the worst. Because even if the rest of your profile is stellar, the best a LinkedIn profile can be, if you don't have a portrait on your LinkedIn profile, you might as well not even have a LinkedIn profile. If a recruiter comes across a profile that doesn't have a portrait, chances are they'll just skip right over you and move on to someone else. No portrait conveys that you aren't interested in building your professional network or presenting yourself professionally online. This tells others to expect that you're probably over 40 and you haven't adapted to the changing business world. But of course, you wouldn't do that. You want a portrait that reflects your best professional self. So let's look at some things you can do to ensure that you get one. First, be really clear about what you're aiming for. Explore sites of companies that have reputations for cutting-edge workplaces and products to get a sense of the style of contemporary portraits. Apple is a great place to start. So are portraits of thought leaders that you would find in Aspen Ideas magazine or the like. Light, airy, positive, simple, elegant. Here, you can see examples of actual LinkedIn portraits that these leaders use. Notice they focus on close-ups of the face with expressions that convey personality and confidence. Next, you want to be really well prepared for the shoot. Getting your portrait taken doesn't start when you go to your sitting appointment. You need to first look at some portfolios of photographers to make sure that their work matches the contemporary style that you're looking for. Each photographer has his own personality and his own style. So you need to get really familiar with what that style is and make sure it matches your vision. You also want to talk to the photographer in advance of the sitting about what you're looking for to make sure that he or she is really clear about what you're expecting. You can share some examples of the portraits that you like of other people to the photographer to confirm your vision. And you also want to be really clear with the photographer in advance of your sitting. What's the pricing structure and what do you get for that price? Now, if you can afford it, you might want to consider having some other shots taken by the same photographer in addition to your sort of headshot or profile or portrait, right? You might want to consider getting some environmental shots like these that help show you in your working environment. These can really help tell your story, especially if you have an online portfolio or blog. Also, keep in mind, not all photographers are the same. They have specialties just like the rest of us in our fields. So you want to look for a professional portrait photographer. I know from personal experience that not all photographers are equally as good at portrait photography. They'll all tell you they can do portraits, but an event photographer or a landscape photographer does not necessarily mean that they're great at portrait photography, even if they're great in the other areas. Now, I know you're probably convinced that your sister-in-law with a great camera can do this for you for free, instead of shelling out a couple $100s on a professional. And she just might be able to. There's nothing wrong with that, if she's really good and can get what you need. But I want you to keep in mind that this is an investment in your career. Paying a pro to take your portrait is much like getting the good quality suitcase that you bought to last you through your business travels, but it's even more important. And last, I want you to put some thought in advance to your sitting about how you want to look. What is the best professional you that you have to offer visually? It should not be a Stepford version of your professional self. So be true to how you typically look. Just crank that up a notch or two to look your best without looking overdone. It's really important that your photo is authentically you. It's okay to let your crow's feet show and your grays to shine. You don't need to look younger, but your photo should reflect an image of someone who understands what works now. Once you have your JPEG of your portrait, you pick your final shot. If you have more than one to pick, that's good as long as they all kind of have a similar look and feel. But I recommend that you just pick one shot, and like any good logo from any major corporation, you use that shot consistently across anywhere online that you're representing yourself professionally, whether that's, you know, a social media account, your blog, your online portfolio, an association membership, forum. This is really important because people will be able to recognize immediately that they've reached the right person based on being familiar with your face, whether they've met you or not. And if you have a name that's very common, this is especially important that they'll be able to identify that they've reached the right John Smith. If you don't use a certain, social media account, for example, professionally, let's say your Facebook page, which most people don't use professionally, then don't use your professional portrait on that page. This is an example of my account that I use professionally on Facebook. But if you're not using it professionally, then don't use your professional portrait because that will confuse people into believing that you are approachable there, whether they know you or not. And last, I'd like to remind you to make a note on your calendar for about 2 years from now to book your next portrait session. The portrait style will likely change over the next 2 years, and how you look certainly will. So just to end it, here are some guidelines that I've put together based on input from professional portrait photographers on things to consider when preparing for your sitting. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I will include a link so you can download this PDF of the guidelines to use when you're preparing for your sitting. Thanks so much.